All right, thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim-Nakron. Just wanted to share with everyone the new developments out of the Supreme Court, the rulings that we are following. One of the most significant rulings coming out today, the Supreme Court essentially killing President Biden's loan reduction plan, something we're going to talk a little bit more about. It affects $400 billion in, canceling or reducing federal student loan debt for millions of Americans. It was a 6-3 decision with conservative justices in the majority. I want to share with you a very special guest joining us today. We have Attorney Seth Pearson, who is with us to provide a little bit of analysis on why this ruling was made and what this really means. Seth, thank you so much for being with us.
So happy to be here, Joy.
Thank you. So, Seth, what is your initial reaction to this ruling? Is this a surprise?
I don't think that this is a surprise. I don't think it was a surprise to anyone. We've watched this court continuously make rulings this way, rolling back rights for, disenfranchised and underrepresented people. This is a very conservative court. Anybody who was surprised by this ruling hasn't been following it very closely. But I think as a former student myself, someone who took advantage of student loans and the student loan program, I think that this was a huge mistake and a really a way in which this court continues to go rogue, and not represent the rights and really the heart of the people. Like we're seeing a court that's ruling based on their own conservative views and not really basing on any precedent.
And so I guess the court held here that the administration needed Congress to offer an endorsement before undertaking such a costly program. The majority rejecting arguments that a bipartisan 2003 law dealing with national emergencies known as the HEROES Act actually gave Biden the power that he claimed it did regarding this loan plan. So that was the ruling there. But like you said, not really a surprise to people who have been following this. Any final thoughts? Because I'm going to ask you about several other topics. Any final thoughts on this before we move on?
Sure. I think that this is just going to continue to be, repetitive. We're going to see this over and over again. We're going to see this court making these kind of rulings, rolling back these rights, affecting millions of people in a really deleterious way. It's really disappointing more than anything else.
Got it. Yeah, well, thank you so much. Also just want to, excuse me, I think the air quality alert is impacting me. But I want to move on and talk a little bit about another issue, a closely watched major Supreme Court decision that came down today, and it's considered a major defeat for LGBTQ rights, for the community, and for advocates. So the Supreme Court ruled that a Christian graphic artist who wants to design wedding websites can refuse to work for same-sex couples, to design these websites for same-sex couples. And one of the court's liberal justices wrote in a dissent that the decision's effect is to, quote, mark gays and lesbians for second-class status, and that it opens the door to other discrimination. Again, this was a 6-3 ruling. This is a breakdown that we have seen. We saw it yesterday with affirmative action being severely limited, affirmative action on the basis of race, severely limited. Same kind of breakdown, 6-3 with the conservative majority. And this ruling was for the designer. Her name is Lori Smith, and this is despite a Colorado law which would bar discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, race, gender, other characteristics. Smith's argument was that the law violated her free speech rights. And her opponents warned that a win for her would allow a range of businesses to discriminate beyond this particular issue. So, Seth, what is your reaction to this ruling? What does this surprise you?
Again, Joy, this is not a surprise, I think, to anyone watching this very conservative court make very conservative rulings. Again, this is why votes matter, right? we had an administration that really tipped the balance in the scales of this court in such a way that we're going to see a continuous rollback of our constitutional rights for minorities, for underrepresented people, for disenfranchised people. This isn't going to end. It's going to continue, and this isn't a surprise to me or anyone. I think, particularly, as a black gay man myself, this affects my community. Yesterday's ruling on affirmative action affects me, and and the people that look like me in a really, pervasive way. And it's really disappointing to watch this kind of civil rights era rollback happening. From a court that's supposed to protect people, right? We're supposed to be expanding rights of individuals, and instead we're narrowing rights of individuals and disenfranchising people all over again in 2023.
And clearly, I can hear in your voice it is something that you feel it personally affects your community, as you said. What's kind of colloquially, what are you hearing? Because you've identified that it's affected people around you. What are people saying?
I think that anytime you want to think that people are reasonable, right? Like most of us agree that same-sex marriages should be legal. People should have a right to love who they want. Women should have a right to choose. This court is ruling against what most people believe, like the sentiments of society as they are right now. But I think it's a strategy for these religious conservative groups. They poise these things in a way that makes it look like they're making reasonable arguments when in fact you're really limiting and narrowing people's rights. And it's really, it's an intelligent strategy, but it's one that's extremely dangerous, particularly to people who are on the outside of, who are affected by these rulings.
So, critics of this ruling have said, and I'm not sure if this is your concern from a legal standpoint as well, but many have said they're concerned that this ruling would allow for a range of businesses to discriminate beyond the LGBTQ community, but also to refuse to serve someone on the basis of race because maybe they're black, or on the basis of their religion because they're Jewish or they're Muslim, or interracial or interfaith couples or immigrants. So that's really what critics are saying, is that it opens the door for other types of discrimination as well, apart from this ruling in itself.
And that's really, that's really the danger here, right? Like, we're watching within days, we've watched them, dismantle affirmative action. We've watched them roll back rights on LGBTQ people. We've watched them disenfranchise, student borrowers. We're months away from the, overturning of Roe versus Wade. This is a snowball effect. This cascades, right? This doesn't end with these rulings. And that's why it's so important that people continue to pay attention, and we continue to fight the good fight, because this doesn't end, right? This is the beginning. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote for the court's 6 conservative justices that, in just explaining this particular ruling, that the First Amendment, quote, envisions the United States as a rich and complex place where all persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands. Gorsuch said that the court has long held that, quote, the opportunity to think for ourselves and to express those thoughts freely is among our most cherished liberties and part of what keeps our republic strong. So that is what he cited as part of the basis for that ruling. Sounds like you disagree. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty words that disenfranchise an entire group of individuals who are already been targeted in a dangerous position, right? And that's what happens when people don't, when it's not your issue, right? It's difficult to empathize and sympathize. You can make a really good argument that this, individual had a right to not, create websites for people whom she disagrees with, but it again has a cascading effect, right? Where does it end then? Do we stop allowing LGBTQ people into restaurants? A restaurant owner who doesn't want to serve them, right? Doesn't want to serve LGBTQ people can foreclose them from coming in. And does it just stop with LGBTQ people? Does it roll into people who are, who don't look like, who look like me, black and brown people? You don't have access to stores and restaurants. I mean, we've lived that era, right? Like it wasn't that far it wasn't that long ago that we were living in that time, and I see it, on its way back. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, so that's definitely the concern, that a lot of people are expressing. Thank you for sharing not just your insight and analysis, but how it personally, I appreciate that you're willing to share with everyone something so personal, which is how it affects you personally and your community. So thank you for that. I want to ask you about another issue that we've been following as well, and this actually concerns a local lawsuit. There are 4 families. Apologize, I'm multitasking and pulling up our website so you can actually see this story that we are following. Yes, we are following the loan plan that has essentially been killed, but we are also following the case of the transgender rights lawsuit here in Georgia as well. And so this concerns a group of families it's 4 families who live in Metro Atlanta who've actually sued Georgia officials after the state legislature passed a law restricting transgender health care for minors. And this comes just as this law is actually set to take effect. So the timing is really critical here. Seth, I know you've gotten a chance to delve into this a little bit. What's your reaction to this lawsuit?
I mean, this is, the courts have been stacked in such a conservative way, particularly here in Georgia, that we're going to see a number of these cases coming down. And I think these are particularly sensitive cases, right? These are transgender children, limiting their right to medical treatment that is life-saving in many instances, that goes against years, decades of science, right? And having the court rule that parents can't make decisions for their own children. I think that this is a real step in the wrong direction. I think it's dangerous, and I think it's unfortunate that we've allowed it to get this far.
And just kind of to share a little bit more background, each of the families here has a transgender daughter. They all range from, and again, it's 4 families living in the Metro Atlanta area who are suing. These transgender daughters all range in ages from 10 to 12 years old. This federal suit argues that SB 140, which passed the Georgia legislature in March and bans most gender-affirming treatment for minors, they claim that it violates the 14th Amendment. This suit was filed on June 29th. That was yesterday, and it's just 2 days before the law takes effect, which is tomorrow, July 1st. The defendants include the Georgia Department of Community Health Commissioner Kaylee Nagel, the Georgia Department of Health's Board of Community Health, and several other public health officials. 2 of the girls in this lawsuit have started puberty blockers, which postpone the effects of puberty in children, and the other 2 had apparently planned to start blockers very soon, but this bill will prevent this care, resulting in, quote, devastating physical and psychological consequences, is what the suit is arguing. And the 2 families said that they would have to consider moving if this ban is not lifted and leaving the state. The suit also says that the ban harms members of Transparent, which is a national organization and support group for parents of transgender children. It does have a chapter in Decatur. And these, quote, these stressful considerations have caused members to lose sleep, experience significant mental turmoil, and fear for the well-being of their children and families. That is what the lawsuit says. Seth, do you think that these families have a strong case moving forward? What would you predict it could be an outcome here?
Yeah, I think in a fair court, they would have a strong case, right? Like you're ruling, these rulings are going against science. They're going against medical treatment. Like you're asking people, you're litigating the rights of parents to decide what's best for their own children. And oftentimes in life-saving situations. Again, these young people are going through a situation that most of us are very unfamiliar with, and to go in and say that their doctor and their parents can't make these decisions for them is incredibly detrimental. And to have the court say that they're trying to avoid psychological damage and physical damage, I think is what they're actually causing much more harm than they're stopping.
And there you see that kind of, I popped it up on the screen. You can see in part that the lawsuit claims that this, quote, violates the fundamental rights of parents to make medical decisions to ensure the health and well-being of their children. So that is what we're seeing in the lawsuit. Any final thoughts on this, Seth, before we let you go?
Yeah, you know, it's just really disappointing. I appreciate you allowing me to speak on this stuff, but to watch this happen, you know, in 2023, to see the rights of so many people being limited, I think it's a reason that we have to continue to fight. We have to continue to vote. Voting matters. Get out here, speak to your, you know, your councilmen and your legislators, and let people know that we don't want to see this kind of thing happening.
All right, Attorney Seth Pearson joining us. Really appreciate your analysis, your expertise, and also you sharing, you know, how these decisions are personally affecting you as well, and you know, taking us into your personal world a little bit, and appreciate that. But I just want to remind our viewers that we're going to have the latest on all of these cases on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com. So I've pulled that up so you can take a look at if you just want to read a little bit more, because it's complicated, and it's fascinating, and for some people it's troubling. And we have these articles if you want to try to learn more about this on atlantanewsfirst.com. We so appreciate everyone joining us, and have a great day. Thank you.